I do think that one of the things that hasn't changed, although everybody, I think, thought it changed, but it really didn't, has to do with service models.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if you back up 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, most of the service was done for the restaurant tech was by somebody that you trusted.
Yeah.
Restaurants bought from someone they trusted,
Yeah.
local, they had a
Yeah.
nearby office. On a Friday night when the printer went down and the credit card machine wasn't working, they expected you to run through 5 red lights to get there, right?
Basically, yeah.
That's how that worked, right?
Yeah.
And they were mad if you didn't do that.
Welcome to another episode of Whisking It All. We're here today with Anthony Presley, the Chief Technology Officer at CBS Northstar and the Managing Partner at TimeForge Labor. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to be chatting with someone who has a lot of experience both in hospitality and in the tech space. I don't know which one's harder. I think they're both hard in their own rights, but together, I think they become exponentially harder. So we'll get into that. I always like to start with just what is TimeForge and what is CBS Northstar, just to set the stage. We'll go into it later, but maybe why don't we start there? Tell people what it is that you do today, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, happy to do so. Happy to talk a little bit about both. I used to think I was a little bit unique in that I work with two companies, but as you dive in and you learn more about the entrepreneurs in our space, it's not that uncommon to find people who are working with 2 and 3 and 4 companies. You're shaking your head. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. I'm sure you've got couple of things in the wings, if you will. Yeah, exactly right. A little bit about those two companies. TimeForge is all about labor management. And so if you think about anything from how do I find qualified applicants all the way through how do I pay them and incentivize them to stay. And the magic is wonderful magic word these days, AI. Which is, such a new thing. It's so new that in 2007, we put AI into our software.
Wow, not bad.
And so that's all about labor. We've got some great big competitors on the market, and we're really good at building product, and we didn't go raise a lot of money. So we're much less marketable in the market from that perspective. And CBS, I think you actually had Jeremy Julian on the show not that long ago. He actually introduced us. CBS is Custom Business Solution. Been around for 30 years. Most of the market knows us as a PosiTouch reseller, and we were for a very long time. Maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago, our founder started building his own point of sale system, really saw the need for the market for mobile first point of sale, and so started building that on the first iPad. And that product has evolved, and we now sell that and really specialize in table service and all the unique problems around table service and coursing. And we have some quick service customers, but think of the tech there. And we have other pieces of tech they're kind of interesting, as you would expect from someone who's been around in the industry for 30 years. So we're neither of the companies that I work with, we're not fly by night. We didn't just go raise VC capital yesterday. Been around for a long time.
That's cool. And we'll get into that. And one of the things that always interests me is kind of like how people got into the hospitality space. And so I have to ask you to start off, how did you first kind of get pulled into the restaurant tech world?
It was two interesting accidents. And maybe I'm not that smart. But I had I was going to school in Lubbock, Texas at Texas Tech University. Okay. And I had a roommate in 1998, and he had a job working for his uncle's business.
Okay.
And they posted a schedule on Sunday night. And you weren't allowed to call to find out when you worked. It was, and they had one phone line, right?
Oh my God.
There was no AI agent that was going to answer this call. So you had to drive. And that was great, except that Craig didn't have a car. And so he had to drive up there every Sunday, just like all the other employees did, and find out when he worked because he might be working Monday.
Wow.
And so he had to pay me in beer money, and I'd drive the sorry sack up there, and we'd go, and the whole time I'm an IT guy, and so I was like, this is really dumb.
Yeah,
This is
this makes sense. Yeah.
why are he doing this? And so we'd start iterating over, hey, this should do it this way, or why are we doing this? And so we started going through the problems, and every once in a while I'd stop and talk to his uncle and be like, why are we doing this? And so we got into that, and I had a different software company. I was an entrepreneur, young entrepreneur. I didn't know what I was doing. I don't know what I'm doing now, but I really didn't know what I was doing then. And so as I was in college, I had a company, I had a customer, and that customer in 1998 was funding a lot of my college, and I actually grew that company to like 60 employees. And then and it was a professional services company, and then they got in some trouble with the federal government, and they got shut down, and that's a whole nother story. But they got shut down, and I woke up one morning and was talking to a U.S. Marshal, and that was a scary thing. And in 2004, I was like, you know what? I don't want to be in this predicament again. I want to build a product that would allow me to not have all of my eggs in one basket. And so I went back to that issue and that incident from 1998, where I was running around to talk about schedules. I looked at the market. Hot schedules were the only thing on the market. And so I went, hey, you know what? Let me go try and figure this out. And so those two things happened, and I started building software for S&B restaurants in Lubbock, Texas, was where I started.
Super interesting. Now, let me ask you this: what? A lot of people ask me this question, so I'm going to ask it to you: is how do you get started? Right? When it comes to tech, people are always like, "What do you do if you don't have a tech background? You just start hiring people. Like, what do you do?" So I'd love to hear from your perspective of your journey. Like, you had this idea, you saw a clear problem. How'd you kind of start with that, version 1.0?
I don't know about you. I've gotten over the years. I'm very privileged to be able to work with a variety of accelerators, and so I've
Yeah,
worked with one at Texas Tech. I've worked with one at UNT, and most recently, the
very
last
cool.
2 years at Baylor.
Nice.
And all of them that we teach a business model canvas. And so there's a way, and there's several books on this. Steve Blank wrote a fantastic book on how to kind of get from 0 to 1, how
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
your business off the ground. But there are a number of folks, and I've run into them, you run into them, they're on the LinkedIn sphere, if you will, of talking about, hey, I'm in hospitality. I see a business problem, but I'm not a technologist. How do I get there? And if you're not careful, there are plenty of consultants that will take all of your money. And so don't do that. Whatever you do, don't do that. And honestly, AI has helped out in this recently. I'd say
Yeah.
in the last 6 or 10 months, my advice has changed. My advice a year ago would have been go interview 100 people that aren't your mom. So anybody that would spot you a lunch, those people don't count. So don't talk to them because their opinion doesn't matter. Go find people who won't spot you a lunch, tell them your idea, ask them about their business problems, and find out if they will advance you 1 month of whatever that service is. And if you can talk to 100 people and 3 or 4 or 5 of them will advance you 1 month of that service, maybe you have an idea.
Yep.
Then you can go to the next step, which is how do I go build it? If you can't do that, then you probably don't have an idea. And you
Yeah.
can scale that. Maybe you go talk to 1,000 people, right? If you're a
Yeah.
VC, then make them go talk to 1,000 people.
Yeah. And there's that book, right? Like, because you said it made me remember the mom test or something like that. No. Yeah. Yeah. It's for people listening. Great book on some of the advice that you're hearing right now from Anthony. I'm always like trying to plug things to help people, so that might be a plug. But yeah, keep going. This is great
Yeah,
advice.
no, that's totally right. The mom test. But the AI thing, I think, has gotten very allows you to do prototyping, and so the fast
Yes.
prototyping. There's a number of tools. I could plug some if you wanted me to, but
Yeah. Drop a few. I got my list too. I'm curious. I'm curious which ones you're loving these days.
So just in the last couple of weeks, we've started playing with a product called Lovable.
That's the one I use.
Yeah.
Lovable.dev. Great.
Yep. So Lovable is great. product out of Sweden. Those guys are iterating fast. Be careful. It can totally change things on you if you're not paying attention. But
Oh,
if you want to iterate on something simple, easy, not real complex business logic, and at
yes.
least get it to a point of where now I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't go build a fully baked app out of it, but
Right.
you can very much build something and then hand it to a professional team to go build it. Rapid prototyping.
And for people listening in, like just to kind of paint the picture a little, like I totally agree. It's funny. I was talking to someone today, and I said something similar, like, "Hey, a year ago my advice would have been kind of different, but today I would build an MVP, with these prototyping tools." And again, I'm with you. I think it'll change, and very soon, like they are getting better and better, and connecting it to actual databases and whatever. Today, I wouldn't rely on it as like a full fledged app, but I think it could save so much time in terms of prototyping it, the whole UI, the UX, the functionality. So you can at least explain it, whether that's just cutting costs to get someone else to build it or showing people or customers to validate it. It's like you can get pretty far. And so for people listening that want to mess, there's tools like Lovable.dev. Google just came up with a cool one, which is like Firebase.studio, which is like really neat. I think Replit was one. Anyways, there's a ton. So if you're out there, just Google, no code tools, and there's a lot you can do. And one thing that has worked well for me, and my 2 cents. I'm sure this will probably change by the time this podcast airs because AI is evolving so fast. But I found with Lovable where I got better results was I would use Claude AI to come up with like the actual prompts and whatever. And then I would, or sometimes even the code, and then I would put that into Lovable, and it ended up giving me a much better end result than when I would just kind of type directly. Because I think when I was typing directly in Lovable, I was a bit lazy. So I'd like, make this, make this too short. But when I was like using Claude, it forced me to like really structure the prompts well. And the app went from like 0 to 100, like real quick. So it was nice, but that's great advice. So prototyping, Lovable.dev is on my radar as well, but there's others, and that's good advice.
Yeah, I would. The other thing I would say is that, especially me as a technologist, and I tend to approach things from a technology perspective. But we started framing this conversation as someone in hospitality wanting to
Yeah.
build some sort of a tech
Yeah.
product. Don't over tech it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many companies run their entire infrastructure on Excel and SharePoint, and like it's not the end of the world. And I often remind my own team, like the entire insurance industry operates off of a freaking CSV file. Trillions of dollars a day. The every ACH on the planet goes through what is a CSV file, and it operates with the federal government back and forth. So like there are cool things you can do with tech, but also sometimes the business is just getting business done. And so
Yeah.
like it's okay to not be
Don't
the
lose
coolest
sight.
tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally agree. I think there's a lesson there that sometimes people definitely over engineer or maybe do things that might sound cool, but to not lose track of what's the actual problem you're solving. And a good piece of advice I got a while back, which was like the difference between a vitamin and a painkiller. And sometimes it's fine. You want to build a vitamin, it's like a Chrome extension or something cool, and that's fine. And there's people who made money off vitamins, nothing wrong with that. But most companies are generally more of a painkiller, and you're solving a big problem, not just a tiny little nice to have like issue. But that's really good advice. And so I'm curious to hear just kind of your trajectory, right? So you get this idea, you start working on it. Unfortunately, you didn't have an AI no coding tool back then to get started. But how did you get your first few customers? Because I think that's the next pivotal point people hit is like, okay, they got something kind of working. They're showing some people, they're getting some good initial reactions. But then it's like that first leap of faith. I don't know about you, but the first time I had someone actually pay for it, even though I was down in the hole, I felt like I was rich. That first paying customer. But I'd love to hear from you. What did that look like? How did you get your first paying customer?
Yeah. So I have two tracks to this. I like to tell them both because they both come with great entrepreneur stories. So the first one was I had that company I had that had 60 employees that the Fed shut down. Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. The large customer did. We were actually doing online advertising. So this was Google SEO. We did a lot of technical stuff, but this was SEO back in like 1998 to 2004.
That's cool.
So raw SEO, but we were also doing ad with like Super Bowl ads. So
Mm.
we were doing some fun stuff, video, having a ball. And so when we launched, we had SEO stuff like back in the day. And so I got our very first TimeForge customer like the next day. Somebody
Wow.
showed up and bought some software
Through
and
SEO.
through SEO.
That's amazing. It's very rare to hear businesses start with it, like SEO day
Yeah,
one, but
yeah,
wow, that's cool.
yeah. 2007, right?
Yeah,
So that was
yeah,
when we launched it. We had it. We went live. They called me and they paid us. I think it was $19 was our selling price. They called me and let me know that they would not pay for a second month unless we added 3 features. So very super nice restaurant operator. Very, but he was very direct. He was like, I paid for it. It was $19. I'm not paying for a second month unless you add these things. Like, okay,
Little
great.
things. Were they things that were like in your wheelhouse, or were they just too random?
No, they were totally in the wheelhouse, but they
Okay.
were very much like, okay, this is the real world. This is a real user giving me real feedback. And I guess this is what a roadmap looks like. We're going to redo the roadmap, right? So hey, if we want to get paid again, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
It was fun. And then I hadn't with that company done door-to-door sales or gone out and
Yeah.
beat the street.
Yeah.
And in the great city of Lubbock, Texas, was Abuelos. And the Abuelos, we'll call it a fine dining Mexican restaurant concepts, 60 or 70 of them at the time. I happened to know a friend of a friend who knew, and so kind of went and showed off some of our software. And I'll never forget the CEO kind of looking me, and this was automated AI scheduling, like, bam, schedule's done. Manager just clicked the button, done, and looked me dead in the face and went, Anthony, I already pay my managers to build a schedule. Why would I also pay you? Like, I didn't know what to say. That was not something I was prepared for. It was like,
Right.
oh, you want your managers to keep clicking for 2 hours while they mess around with an Excel spreadsheet? Like, okay.
Interesting.
So
Did you end up closing that client?
No, never closed them. Never
Oh,
got.
wow.
I did pivot and say, okay, well, what problem do you have? And they were like, oh, compliance is a problem, HR is a problem, clocking in early is a problem. And we did go build all of those things, and they then sold to private equity and sold again,
Again.
and that is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it
it
is.
didn't work out. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Wow. And then what was the next pivotal point? I think about like the classic startup journey. Obviously, there's a million and one ups and downs, but generally, it's idea to some type of version one prototype to get your first client, and then there's eventually that kind of milestone where now you got How did you guys go out and grow? Was it pure SEO, or or like you said, were you beating the streets? Like, what were you doing to kind of like, because I know TimeForge today is quite big, but back then, how did you kind of get that first spurt of growth?
We partnered with resellers. We got a
Okay.
reseller channel. This would have been 2009, 10, somewhere in there. Got a reseller channel and started partnering up with the POS at the time, right? Toast didn't exist. Square didn't
Crazy.
exist, I mean,
Yeah.
we're old. That's where all my hair went. And so we got dealers, Aloha and Micros and Posi Touch and those guys.
Got
And
it.
so we partnered with those dealers, and then frankly, we spread our wings a little bit into some other industries. We got into the grocery industry.
Mm.
And then we did raise a round of financial capital in 2014 and went to go after some larger customers after we did that. And that
Awesome.
kind of took us to the next level, if you will.
Got it. I love that. I love that. And I imagine, obviously, 30 years this company is around. Well, between CBS and this, and you're learning a ton of stuff. So, what are some of the biggest shifts that have evolved from your point of view over those years? Right, like we kind of hit the AI. I'm curious, like, what are some things when you look back the last 20, 30 years? How has your mindset kind of evolved around product and around tech and restaurants?
I do think that one of the things that hasn't changed, although everybody I think thought it changed, but it really didn't, has to do with service model.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you back up 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, most of the service was done for the restaurant tech was by somebody that you trusted.
Yeah.
Restaurants bought from someone they trusted,
Yeah.
local, they had a
Yeah.
nearby office. On a Friday night when the printer went down and the credit card machine wasn't working, they expected you to run through 5 red lights to get there, right?
Basically, yeah.
That's how that works, right?
Yeah.
And they were mad if you didn't do that. And somewhere along the way, I think it was a large volume of private equity and venture capital funding. The dealerships all got acquired. NPR bought up a bunch. Shift4 acquired a bunch, but they've all been Heartland and Global bought up a bunch, and they got bought up, and then the proliferation of all these other software products have happened, and they're centralized, and that's TimeForge is the same way. CBS is now the same way. Imagine Whisk is the same way. A lot of these products are the same way, and that's put a challenge, I think, on the support models, because it's no longer, hey, there's two local dealers that I have a better relationship with person A than person B. Yeah. It's now I put in this system that I bought from a guy I don't know, and drop shipped it from somewhere I had never been. And I installed this equipment. Now I'm calling someone that I've never talked to before, and I get a help desk in a time zone I don't know where they are, and I hope they know how to fix my problem.
Yeah.
And I think that come full circle here. Probably in the last 18 months, I've heard more conversations about the service matters. Like it's suddenly, it was I can get this tech cheaper. I can get this tech. It has these cool features. It's moving the needle. And now it's like, it doesn't matter. My managers are pissed. My team is pissed. My customers are pissed because we're spending so much time on the phone with service, and it's not working.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, I totally resonate with that. Like our team laughs about it now because like, who would have thought the hospitality industry likes hospitable people? But it's like, it's super obvious now, but it makes sense that we've seen it. It's one of the reasons, like a lot of the times when we get people switching from other inventory systems to Whisk, two of the main feedback we get is one, our customers, like once they're happy, is, hey, your support time, I think our average ticket's 3 minutes. I say ticket, but it's direct chat. And they're like, hey, sometimes it takes, a day, 2 days when we're dealing with our other inventory supplier. And then the other common one we get is onboarding, which we really, in the beginning, even our investors were kind of like, oh, you guys are spending too much time on onboarding. But we were big believers if we spent time in the beginning with them to connect to POS, help them with their recipes, help them get the invoices in the system, all the back of house cost of good stuff, they'd be successful. And to be honest, it was a bet, and it's been working out, because one of the second biggest feedback we get when people switch is, I've been with company X or Y, it's been 6 months, I'm still not set up. I got some of my recipes in, I'm still waiting. They're never like fully set up. So we kind of took that part seriously and said, okay, they're most excited when they first sign up. How do we keep that momentum, and like, send us your recipes, let us help you enter them, send us so we can, because we know, at least on our end, for the way our product works, is like I always compare it kind of to like a HubSpot or something, not because of scale or anything like that. Obviously, HubSpot's a massive company, but in terms of as a CRM, it's not that useful until you connect your calendar and connect this, and then create a pipeline and and then you're like, oh, I get it. But if you just logged into HubSpot and everything was blank, you'd be like, why am I paying? That's the same thing with the Whisk. If you don't upload invoices, connect your POS, put recipes, it's like you're staring at nothing. So we're very adamant about that. But I'm with you. So that's a good one. I'd love to know what you guys, how do you guys handle that? So like, that in-person support is kind of important as you guys are scaling, right? But for both companies, how do you guys think through that? Do you have a lot of feet on the ground when it comes to support? I'd love to hear kind of like your model.
Yeah. So in both companies, support's the largest department. Okay. Like it really is. And so at CBS, we actually post our speed to answer. And so how fast do we answer? So I think last quarter it was like sub 45 seconds. Like you're going to get a live person in 45 seconds.
That's awesome.
And so we do that. TimeForge is interesting because of just dynamics of the product. And so for lots of obvious reasons, Mondays are payday, right? And so you're running payroll on Monday. Typically, pretty much everybody in the company is tech support on Monday. And we do that. And we very high touch, lots of white glove support, very similar to Whisk in that, we make sure that everybody gets up and running, fully configured. We don't do free trials online. Like you're not going to go online and get a free trial and have a subpar experience. Because we think that software, look, there's lots of great software on the planet. And if you go list every one of our competitors next to us, like they probably feature for feature win. They've got bigger dev teams. They raise more money. Like go get it. But the reality is that change management's freaking hard. And getting the organization to change and getting everybody bought in and wanting to do,
you want to,
you want to do inventory, you want to do cycle counts. Why? That's hard. And so that requires conversation, requires human. So we take a different approach, anyway. And so that means we're slower growing. And frankly, we've been part of a rocket ship, to finish some of that story with TimeForge. Like we merged we raised money in 2014. We merged in 2016 with a strategic acquirer. We had some private equity money behind us, and we went and did 9 mergers and acquisitions in 4 years.
Wow, in 4 years.
4 years.
Wow.
We blew up. We had nearly 600 employees. We went gangbusters, man. It was great.
That's awesome. That's crazy. That's good.
When we went to go spin the company back out in 2020, everybody was like, tap, tap. We didn't like that. We don't want to be that big. We want to stay small. And it's funny, you and I were talking about the NRA show. I ran into one of our competitors who runs sales at one of our competitors at the NRA show. And we've become friendly over the years. And he stopped me at the NRA show. He said, just want you to know, you're doing it right. You get to do what you want to do. Because you kind of get to grow, you get to do what your customers want to do, you get to build roadmap the way you want to do it. So we do things differently.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, at a certain scale, you kind of don't have that luxury of freedom. You got a lot of people to report to, and it becomes a job more than the entrepreneurial cycle, which I totally get. I'm curious to get your perspective on the whole labor side and the POS side. But the reason I want to start with the labor side is because when I think about a restaurant, typically the first thing when it comes to tech, you open a new restaurant, usually the first thing they're thinking of is POS, because they're like, okay, I got to hire people and I got to, this is post licenses and construction, all that. But, I got to hire people and I got to make sure I can collect money. So usually POS is first on the list. Something like Whisk usually comes second. After a couple months of opening, they're like, am I making money? That's when they reach out to Whisk. Labor is pretty important and scheduling. So I'm curious, number one, when do people reach out to you guys when it's a new restaurant? Is it pretty early on? Is it the same time as the POS? And then I love, because again, we have a lot of restaurant listeners, managers, owners, etc. And so when Jeremy was on the show, we went deep into the POS, what to look out for, where do people get screwed, this, that, like what makes a good POS, etc., which is great. And I want to get some of that opinion from you. But before we do POS, because I haven't done labor yet, love to do that with you on the labor side. So for a restaurateurs listening, maybe you're using a labor tool, maybe you're not. Maybe you've tried some, you hated them. Maybe you're using one you love. But you can hear from an expert right now, Anthony, who's literally built a company around this. I want to get your perspective. What do you think people get wrong when they're choosing a labor and scheduling tool?
Yeah, great question. So you mentioned when you're opening a new restaurant, you're picking a labor system, and the reason for that is that it's federally and state mandated, right? That you have to pay. There are all these rules and regulations,
number of hours,
the compliance, the HR things. You're going to get slapped, and so there's none of that around the inventory side. Maybe there should be, by the way. There should be. But that's the first thing. The second thing, and it's always interesting to me in the restaurant space because other industries are not like this. But in our industry, like the POS sometimes is an afterthought. Like we need to have one because how hard can it be? We're ringing up an item and we're collecting money. Like any of them can do that. I've been to a trade show. There's 500. Pick one. And I know Jeremy went into that a little bit because they're not all the same.
Exactly. And people have no idea. And I want to get into that with you because QSR versus sit down, splitting bills, this, that. We'll get into it.
It's a thing, but it really in the restaurant industry, that POS is the heartbeat. And often, to your point, people choose the POS, and POSs often have a labor component. And we've seen this for decades that the POS had a punch in and a punch out, and they had a basic scheduler. And especially for an SMB, oftentimes that was good enough, right? That was
Yeah.
good
Similar on the
enough.
inventory side. Good
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened over the years, and I was running around. I told you we sold to resellers. I'd run around, I'd go to NCR and I'd be like, please allow us to integrate. Please allow us to bring in this advanced thing that we've spent our entire life building. And they'd go, nah, we've got it. We've got it. And now what's happened? Now what's happened is that all these states have put in the compliance and the regulations and the fair work week and the compliance around paid and unpaid breaks, and do you get paid an extra hour, and all this stuff. And it's just, and if you don't pay attention to it, it turns into a class action lawsuit. So now I have some other friends in the POS business that are coming and going, hey, Anthony, I have like a team of 8 people that are over here just building time and attendance, just building labor. Can we not do that? And we have customers that are calling and are going like, this POS time and attendance thing is not working. Like I'm getting sued. I'm getting lawsuits. I'm not paying people properly. The calculations are wrong. Like it's a problem, right? So
What state, out of curiosity, just quick side note, I'm sure you know, what states are the worst? My guess is just California, because California is all super strict. But
always California.
yeah, always California. Okay.
Oregon, Washington, New York,
Okay.
Colorado, right?
Yeah. Okay.
All the states you might think of, but there's some weird ones. There's some strange rules in Portland, the city of Portland versus the county around Portland, and like rules for where you get. There's just some weird, funky stuff.
I can only imagine. Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess you got to give a little thanks to Abuelos from the early days, even though you don't work with them. They were onto something with the whole compliance thing.
They were totally onto it. We've spent a lot of time on compliance. Our COO spends a lot of time. She's on the SHRM, Human Resources Board, and so she does a lot with that and the compliance. So you ask, what do they get wrong? Generally, somebody chooses like a really great, scheduling tool, and then they go, and then that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then those scheduling tools kind of will bolt on compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out the thing that actually matters to your business is the compliance, and you should bolt on the scheduling perhaps.
Right.
At least if you think about it from a risk mitigation.
Right.
But where else do they go wrong? Look, some concepts, if you have variable scheduling, like if you're a small QSR and like you have 3 people on staff, then like you don't need sales forecasting. I had a wonderful chat with a friend not that long ago, thought leader in the industry, and he was like, 70% of restaurants don't need forecasting. Like, it doesn't cost extra to have the truck show up with more food on Thursdays than it does Fridays. Like, and just have them show up, So, he got on a riff about it. But on the labor side, if you're staffing, more or less the same, then like you don't need forecasting. But if you've got highly variable hours, then get a good forecasting system.
Right.
And I got to tell you, there are a lot of people that have forecasting and they check a box, and it's garbage.
I can imagine. Yeah. People sell a lot of forecasting or AI stuff, and it's not really AI. It's just, it's just.
You got to run into that all the time. You've got to run into that with competitors all the time.
Yeah, a lot of people definitely oversell. It's definitely a mentality thing. Like some people just over promise, under deliver, and then we've done the opposite for a lot of the time. Kind of under promise, try to over deliver. We're trying to get. Over the years, we got more confidence. It's been good, but we learned in the early days, it's like, okay, at a certain point, you have to have some level of confidence because people are looking at you. But I never over promising. But yeah, there are a lot of people out there that over promise, and I'm with you. Like a lot of people might not need it. Where you need it makes sense if you're, like you said, super variable. Maybe you're in a climate that's super seasonal, or the type of place you run is next to a concert hall. So it's the more volatile, probably the more it makes sense. But if not, you probably have, you'll probably have a very repeatable schedule, all things equal,
Yep. And then you're dealing with humans. And so then you need a really good communication platform. And that's
That
what
makes
you really
sense.
should be shooting for, is a communication platform, that is
So you think
highly
about
compliant.
compliance first,
Yeah.
bolt-on scheduling, bolt-on communication. That makes sense. And then similar, and we'll get into the POS, but the same way with, at least from a POS standpoint, I think there's certain POSs that obviously do a lot better for full service and what that requires, and versus maybe a QSR and speed and whatever. So there's clear differences, and even we partner with some POS that are really niche in the bar side, like quick shout out to SmartTab. They're very good. They're a bit more known on the West Coast, but they're really good, let's say, on the bar specific side. They have a segment, as an example. What do you find, let's say, from the labor side makes the biggest difference? Is it number of locations, is it the type of restaurant, is it number of staff? Like, what do you see is probably the biggest factor on like what tool someone should go with?
I think it has to do a little bit with how big the internal support team is.
Okay,
And
elaborate.
so, yeah, and I think this may be true in your world as well. I'd be curious to hear if it's the same. But
Sure.
as an organization gets bigger, jobs get deeper, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you've got a one store, one operator, they're wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are the chief bottle washer and the CEO and the head of HR and right. And then
Yeah.
and so they need as close to an all-in-one tool as they can get.
Fair
Right.
enough. So those are the people that might be fine with a POS that does it all
Right.
good enough,
Right.
kind of thing. Okay.
Or pick 3 tools. To your point,
Right.
you've got an inventory tool, you've got a POS tool, you got a labor tool.
Yeah.
But
Makes
you don't
sense.
need a wage management tool and an onboarding tool and a this and a that, right?
Right.
Whatever.
Right. Got it.
As that expands out and becomes, you get to 20, 30, 40, 50 stores, and then now you've got a head of HR, and that head of HR also has someone who's responsible for talent management or L&D or payroll or, these other
I
things.
see.
And then
Yeah.
they now have a resource, or they are the resource to manage their portion of the tech stack, if you will.
Makes sense.
Then suddenly they have their own needs. And that can go really well. They can go, I really need something that helps me with hyperlocal recruiting because I have stores and I want people that live within a mile of the store, or 3 miles of the store. And I'm going to recruit really strongly that way. Or they could get, they could go, oh, I really need that button to be blue, and I'm not going to put in a system unless the button's blue. And you and I both know there are people that do that.
Yeah.
Even though they could work around the fact that the button's not blue, but they're not moving until the button's blue because that's their job. And so we find that the smaller the organization, the more the all-in-one, the bigger the organization, the more they want to be able to pivot, which is where you need APIs and you need the integrations. And
that's fair.
We've built TimeForge in a way that you don't have to use all the modules. You may only use one module, and that's fine.
That's cool. That's good. Where do you guys find your kind of sweet spot? It sounds like now you can kind of do any size client, but historically, I guess, was your sweet spot the 20 to kind of 50 location you kind of mentioned, or really now today it doesn't matter, anything and everything?
We do. Honestly, we started in the SMB space, and then we probably the largest customer we've had on the platform was Sprouts, and 48,000 employees.
Jesus.
Publicly traded company.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we can do just about anything. After we sold the company, we kind of got away from, we'll call them the startups. They're not startups anymore, but we got away from the Toast and the Square and the Heartland restaurant. And then last year we acquired Lineup AI. And so we bought all of Lineup AI's software assets, their forecasting assets, and then all their integration. And so we got back into a bunch of 1, 2, 3 store operators. So we now have customers all over the place of all different shapes and sizes.
Okay. If people want to learn more about TimeForge, I always like to plug things along. Again, my goal is just help people listening. So people are like, okay, this TimeForge thing sounds interesting. How can they find TimeForge? And I'd love you to maybe just walk through. You mentioned the modules, just the key kind of modules and what they do, just to kind of pique the curiosity.
We make it really easy. You go to timeforge.com. And right there, we spend a lot of time on the website. We don't have a huge sales team, so we're not out knocking on doors. You'll see us at trade shows, but you go to timeforge.com. You're going to find out we've got a bunch of modules. You don't have to use them all. You can use one or more.
Yeah.
But they follow the employee life cycle. So they start with hiring. How do you find people to work in your restaurants?
Yeah.
How do you hire them and get them to fill out paperwork?
Yeah.
That's important. And how do you make sure they don't, back to that compliance, make sure they don't use the computers if they don't have the paperwork? Then the next thing there is we have some HR modules. So we track things like certifications and serve safe and
Nice.
harassment training,
Okay.
employee handbooks, that kind of stuff.
Very cool.
Then we have the whole scheduling module, everything
Right.
from make it manually to click a button, analyze my sales. It's automatically done for me.
Very cool.
We do all the clocking in and out. We can do that with a POS. We can do that with a time clock. We can do that on a phone. Lots of ways to clock in and out. We acquired a survey company, so we can do 360 surveys. We can do
nice.
pulse surveys. Yeah,
That's neat.
yeah. So you think about how is your staff doing? Right now, are you having high turnover? Are you forgetting to talk to people? Back to that are we being hospitable to our hospitality people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
really
we
cool.
have an earned wage access product as well. So we went out and built that with a financial partner so that there was no fees to the employees. And so they can get paid, clock in, clock out, get paid before they get to their car, and then get their tips distributed in the same way.
Okay, that's really neat. And then last but not least, the kind of forecasting tool you guys acquired. Can you chat a bit about that? Like what kind of stuff were they doing? And because it sounds pretty interesting, so maybe just to share with the listeners.
Yeah, happy to. So Lineup AI started in 2020. Was a thesis by an insurance company. It was a great thesis. Was, hey, if operators are doing a great job running their business, could we reduce some of their insurance premiums? And if you know anything about workers' comp and all of that, it's pretty expensive to run a restaurant because of that. And so they started building tools. And one of those that they built was a forecasting and scheduling tool, somewhat similar to TimeForge. And ran it, had a great team at one point in time. They had 24, 25 people on staff, was very focused on the machine learning and the AI, and had built all kinds of algorithms around it. And they were looking at sales, at item level sales, at consuming all the data in from the POS and from other systems. Unfortunately, they raised a Series A and they were funded by a venture studio. And then unfortunately, last year in 2024, they ran out of money. They did not go secure a Series B. And so we stepped in and through a competitive process, acquired their assets. And cool. Merged them in. And so we've about got almost all their assets merged into ours now.
Wow.
Yeah. And so,
okay.
Yeah.
That's super cool. No, it's really interesting. It's I think, like we kind of mentioned, right? POS, cost control, labor, compliance, like these are core parts of running a restaurant business. And so for people listening, definitely check out, timeforge.com. I think that's awesome. And then, as we slowly get to wrapping up, I also want to get your opinion on POS because, you know a lot about the tech side and you know a lot about POS. And so I would be doing a disservice if I didn't ask you at least a little bit about POSs because that's a big one. I can't tell you how many customers always ask me. I try not to get too involved because it's so hard to recommend a POS, and then if something doesn't work out, you're like the guy who recommended it. But my best advice I typically give them is like, listen, write down your top 5 like things that are really important to you, and then focus on that. Because the one thing that I always notice is sometimes restaurateurs get distracted. And so they'll just, this POS has this online ordering and this POS does that. And I'm like, wait, but what do you need? And if the most important thing you need is, I don't know, splitting the bill, then like, okay, who splits the bill the easiest? Like focus. But I'd love to hear from you. You've been in the industry, you've set up and been, seen so many clients. Taking that same question for labor, I think is going to be another big question, POS. What are the biggest mistakes you see restaurants make when choosing a POS? And what are some tips you can give them?
I think POS is one of the things that often goes unnoticed. It's a thing that just people assume it's table stakes. And so like I mentioned earlier, like you've got to have it. And so everyone just assumes when you say the acronym POS, they just assumed that POS means POS. And so,
Right.
and it doesn't. So I would tell you two things. I would build on what you just said, build a list of 5 or 10 things that you think are critical to your organization. And if you need some help, use the AI, use Chat GPT
Yep.
to help you
Yep.
build, because one sentence
Yep.
isn't going to do it. Write
Yeah.
out a whole paragraph.
Yeah. I'm a poke bowl, 3
Yeah,
location. This is what I do. The most important thing is speed. I
right.
have a lunch rush. I agree.
Well,
Nice big prompt. Give me like the most important things I should look at. That's great advice.
yeah.
So yeah, take it a step further. That makes sense. Put that into ChatGPT. And quick side note for restaurants that are lazy, it happens to me too. Just use the audio feature. Just use the voice feature. Save you time. Talk it out loud. Done. Okay, good advice.
100%.
And then based on that list, what would you say next?
Do that. Number 2,
Yeah.
do not buy a system unless you've actually seen those things work.
Fair. Going back to overpromising.
Yeah. If you didn't see those things work, just assume that your job is forfeit. Okay, because I cannot tell you how many people will put in a system and then be like, well, the guy told me it would do that, or I saw it on a PowerPoint, and I'm like,
Right.
I would not do that. Like, you're jeopardizing your job because you put something in that somebody told you that you've never met from a continent, what that you don't know anything about, and you just assume you take their word for it. Again, and so that's maybe the other side
Good
of
one.
hospitality.
Yeah.
You just assume you'd take your word for that. So if you didn't see it work, just assume it doesn't exist.
That's a good one.
So I think that's the second thing. The third thing I would say is that many people focus on the point of sale and forget the layer under the point of sale.
Agreed.
And it's amazing how much and so I get into this argument with people all the time. Well, are you hybrid? Is your point of sale hybrid, or is it on premise? We only want cloud. And I'm like, well, why? Well, if it's all in the cloud, then and I'm like, well, do you have redundant routers? Do you have a 5G cell failover in all of your stores, including the one in the mall parking lot? What are you going to do when they decide to re-asphalt and dig everything up and you have no internet for 5 weeks? Like, these things, like, sometimes people don't remember, but it's the foundation of the business. And so people won't spend that extra $1,000 on a network switch to have redundant network switch.
Right.
And that would have kept them from being offline. So, just
and imagine how many sales they miss out on that, right? Like, easy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. And maybe there's a lesson there in itself, which is sometimes I get it. Restaurants are tight. You're trying to keep things in budget, but sometimes you got to pick the things to nickel and dime. And I think that's an art in itself, but I'm with you. And I've seen it. Sometimes people nickel and dime the wrong things. And I've seen it with Whisk. People will be like, oh, this other software is $50 a month cheaper. And I'm like, that's cool. But if it's going to take you 5 hours more a week to do inventory, who cares? It's like, sometimes they look at the wrong, try to save pennies, but it costs you dollars, kind of thing.
That's exactly right. So yeah, having that fundamental network layer, redundant, and it's this online ordering thing is getting out of control, right? If you don't have redundant, is it getting into the store?
Right.
It doesn't really matter. So you've got to have all of that up and running and all the backups and all the things, and then the POS. Yeah, make sure you've got the right POS. There's a lot of POSs that are, make sure if you're table service that it can do all the table service things. I would tell you that there are a lot of POSs in quick service right now because of the explosion during COVID of all the quick service concepts. Very hard to find quick service POS or table service POS right now.
And just to quickly double click on that, because funny enough, Whisk, because we started very much on the alcohol side. Now we do food and beverage, but because we start on the alcohol side, a big chunk of our customers are full service restaurants. So let's just go a bit deeper because I think this could be helpful to them. What should these full service restaurants look for in a POS that's, important? Because you see this all the time. So maybe you could just highlight a few things that they could think about.
Yeah. So when you're looking for a full service, you're looking for things like, we'll start with that one. What happens if I go offline? Like, does your POS work fully if you go offline? Or a lot of POSs, you're stuck with that ticket is stuck on one particular, whatever the last terminal was. So if
Oh
table
shit.
14 was on terminal 2, like you can only interact with that until you get back online. You better go back to that terminal
Wow.
to work on table 14. And so that's a thing, that's real. And so, but you're looking for things like, can you do coursing? Can you do automatic coursing? Can I just come in and order food for Angelo and it's going to auto fire after, maybe your appetizers fire in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Or,
Mm.
can I, as your server, control the pacing of the food? Or am I going to send that to a kitchen display system and that kitchen display system is going to control the pacing, right? What kind of an experience do I want you to have? Right. So that's important. You mentioned splitting checks earlier. That is kind of funny. Like, is there one way to split a check? Everybody's done that where you've gone in and been like, here's 3 credit cards. Can you split
Oh
it?
God.
But I need to split it
Yeah.
this way and that way. And inevitably the server is like, oh, my system can't do it. I
Yeah.
promise you the system probably can do it. They just don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but the reality is that some of systems can't do it. And so, can the system split it 11 different ways? And that's important to a lot of people, right? My corporate card, I can't charge and be reimbursed for alcohol. So I want you to move all the alcohol to my personal card and all the
Mhm.
non-alcohol. How many clicks does it take to do
Right.
that?
Especially when it's
Doesn't
a table at 10. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that
Yeah.
doesn't matter at a QSR, but it
Right.
matters in table service. Is
Right.
there a handheld that I can walk over to? Is that handheld a very nice experience where I'm the server and when it comes to time to pay out and tip that I hand you a separate device, or is this an awkward thing where I like hand it to you and I'm looking over and you're doing a survey, or like what is the
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah, it's the worst, eh? When you got the server looking at the tip, you're like, what do I do? All right.
Don't tell me the tip and hand
Yeah.
it back to me, please. Like, the whole
Yeah.
thing. And
That's
so,
funny.
yeah, yeah.
That's good advice. That's good advice. I think it's so different, right? A quick service that you care about speed. You usually have peaks, whether it's maybe the lunch rush, the dinner. I mean, depending on the type of QSR and where you're located, but there's probably a couple hours in that day where you make 80%, and in certain ways, full service could be similar. But I'm with you. It's very different. The one area I'd love to pick your brain, and I know we're coming up on time, but is the data side of things. I know it's always talked about, and people are always like, okay, how can you make the guest experience better? You have the reservation data, you have their ordering, Angelo comes back, it's his birthday, it's this, it's that. How do you guys think through that? Like, do you guys have your own kind of internal CRM? Do you guys integrate with others? Like, I'd be curious to just learn a little more about that side, because it comes up a lot, I find, when restaurants want it, and maybe they're getting some of it through OpenTable, maybe some of it through a loyalty app they're using, some of it through this. How do you guys think through that side of the business?
Yeah. And the power in the data is not having the data, right? It's doing something with the data,
That's
right?
correct. Yeah, true.
Yeah. And a lot of that goes back to that change management. Like, you've got to train people to do things with the data. And so, and you don't normally do that with a shotgun. You've got to do that one step at a time. And so we look for little places in the POS where we can inject touch points. You mentioned Open Table, that they're a partner. We have other partners that do similar things, but
Yeah.
so for example, you can reserve online, which is another thing you don't generally do in a QSR world, by the way.
Correct. Yeah.
And so you're going to reserve online. And then when you come in and you get sat at a table, we'll automatically associate that that Angelo came in and is sat at that table. We'll pull your reservation, your birthday, your anniversary, all of that information in and associate it with that ticket. And so now we can notify the manager, hey, there's somebody here. There's a big shopper here. It's their anniversary. You should swing by, and we can drop a pin on that table. We can do some other things so that guest touch experience is there. Again, stuff you wouldn't really have to do in a QSR world, but you do need to do in a table service world.
I love that. Last question for you, because I know we're on time, but I always like to just ask, what's a restaurant tech trend that you're watching closely right now? I know there's a lot out there, but what's something you're keeping your eyes on?
There's a lot, and it's something I'm cheating because we've got our hand in a little bit, but um, but I think there's two, so yeah, I guess I'll cheat. I'll say there's two. One
Yeah.
is this concept of gamification,
Okay. Tell me
and
more.
I think that I think gamification with customers is going to continue to be a thing, right? How do you and it's kind of a twist on loyalty, and that's been around for a while, but I think people are starting to figure it out, and I think we're starting to see that come. Can you tell the clock with my hands a lot?
That's good.
We're trying to bring other brands into it, where there's like cross-brand promotions, and we're starting to see some of that where you're getting, hey, if I'm shopping here all the time, how do I get my Netflix bill paid for, right? Like, how do we bring in some of this other stuff? You get some of these larger brands that are starting to dip into gamify some of this stuff. And
That's
so I think
cool.
that's very interesting. And I think we're starting to see some of that with employees as well, which is I'm from the generation of I'm getting paid to do a job, so I'm going to do my freaking job.
Right.
And I think we have enough people in the workforce. This Gen A is supposed to take over. Here in the next couple of years, there'll be 50% of the workforce in Gen A and Gen Z, and they're like, I came to work. That's the base pay. Where's my bonus pay? Right. And so
A different mentality. Yeah.
It's a different mentality. Like, I came here, I busted my butt. I did better than everybody else. Where's my commission?
Yeah.
You can't fault them for that. So I think the gamification's one thing. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of time, effort, and money spent on front end, whether or not that's online ordering, kiosks, whatever. I think there's a lot of tech that's wasting in the back of the kitchen.
Agreed. Yeah.
The
Agreed.
KDF, all of that, the optimization, some of what you're doing, and I think that there's a lot there that has been untouched.
Yeah, totally agree with the backup stuff. It's interesting. And you're seeing some of it even just with like prep things or like, machinery and like, peeling vegetables or whatever it may be, but, or the avocado thing with Chipotle. But it is interesting because it's like really just you're talking about saving on labor, and you're just talking about something that people probably don't want to do anyway. So it's a good example of where people don't mind being replaced by robots. I don't think anyone's dying to slice avocados. Maybe you got some avocado aficionados. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
That's awesome. No, that's good. Well, look, we'll see where it goes. I always like to get those predictions to see kind of what you're keeping on. And last but not least, this is just for people to find you. So I know you mentioned TimeForge. Love you to plug CBS as well. And then just plug yourself. Like if people want to find you on LinkedIn or whatever, we're going to link it all, but it's good to just people listening in.
Yeah. Please find timeforge.com. Easy. CBSNorthstar.com, also pretty easy, like the TV station, but not. So CBSNorthstar.com. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the first Anthony Presley you'll find. And feel free to connect with me. I connect with a lot of people. Happy to leverage my network to help out anybody in the industry anytime I can.
I love that. Well, Anthony, look, thanks for being here. I think there's a lot of good advice you shared, and I think for the people listening, they'll appreciate that. So thank you for spending the time with me on the Whisking It All podcast. It was great having you on.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Great to get to know you a little better.
If you want to learn more about Whisk, head to whisk.ai and book a demo.